everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our newsletter, our Facebook group, on our YouTube channel, and our great sponsors, Italy Rooting, Abiativa Casa, and Phil Italy. And my guest today is Anthony Castelvecchi. And great to have you, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here and join this wonderful project that you have.
Thanks. So I want to start with, I love your last name, Oldcastle. That's a super name to have.
It is. It's very unique. I love it.
Well, and it makes you wonder how your ancestor got that name.
Yep.
Was he the keeper of the castle? Was he just an old guy who used to sit in front of the castle?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can always make up stories, right? When you don't know the full truth, and you can say, there was royalty somewhere down the line 500 years ago. So, and it makes a little more sense too, because the last name's Tuscan. You had all those little like city states and royalty in Tuscany. So, God only knows, maybe, who knows? But yeah, it's a great last name to have. Super unique.
Yes.
From my understanding, anyone who has the last name I'm related to. So I think it's only comes from one tree, which is pretty rare to have, I guess, from almost any culture.
Well, some of my way, 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 way back ancestors were nobility from Tuscany. So,
Wow.
and we were just there recently. And I guess my favorite ancestor from the north is Isabella d'Este. And we went to her family's castle in Ferrara, which anybody listening, Ferrara's a small little place out of the way, no tourists. So it's really, really nice. It's really, really nice there. But it was a cool place because it was restored really very, very well. And they have a tower you could climb and you look over all of Ferrara. It's a pretty neat place. So now I know your family, you have some family from the north and some from the south. Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad's side of the family is Northern Italian and my mom's side of the family is Southern Italian. I have like a pretty big mix from a bunch of different regions, which is fun because, a lot of people can trace it usually to one or two. I can trace my ancestry to four regions of Italy. Technically, one being in the north in Liguria, and then central in Tuscany, and then in the south in Campania and Sicily. So, yeah, it's super cool. It's a big story of just the different waves of immigration as well into the US. I mean, most of the immigration to the US was from the South. And so my mom's side definitely attaches more to that narrative. My dad's side obviously being a little bit more unique in that regard, because I mean, I don't know too many people personally of a lot of ancestry from the north. It tends to be more Sicilian, Calabrese, Bade, stuff like that from the South. But yeah, I can talk a little bit about kind of my heritage from my dad's side. So my dad's side is Tuscan and Genovese. From in Tuscany, from the very kind of far north part of the province of Lucca, so very very close to Liguria, anyways. And then also the province of Genoa from the city, and then from a small town in Genoa as well called Ponte Giacomo. And that side is really cool, I guess. Like, considering this is a whole genealogy thing, I learned a lot of stuff through documentation on that side of the family. So my great grandfather, so with same last name, Castelvecchi, the one from Barga, Lucca in Tuscany, he actually came to the U.S. in the early 1920s and settled in Chicago. And I went through this whole process because, just like kind of everybody else during COVID, you got a little bit bored looking at this, that, and the other. And I started looking into like maybe possible routes to Italian citizenship just for fun. And I was working with this company that did a lot of research for me, and I found out that my great grandfather arrived in the US as a US citizen. And I'm like, how is that possible? You step foot into the US at 18 years old as a US citizen. Well, I had never known that there was documentation of his father had went back and forth from Italy multiple times. I found some of the ship records and had applied for his naturalization in the US, and he got it when my great grandfather was a minor. So then when my great grandfather immigrated here, all he had to do was put in the proper documentation and he was already an American citizen the first time he stepped on American soil. So obviously that line was cut for the possibility of getting citizenship through there, but I learned a really cool history that still has a lot of questions because I'm not really sure why my great great grandfather was going back and forth. I'm assuming probably for work reasons. That's like a very, very one of the interesting stories from my dad's side. And then another story from that side, from the Genovese part, was I was still kind of looking into this whole Italian citizenship thing. I found a lot out through this, which was cool. It allowed me to do a lot of research into my history and the documentation. So my great great grandmother was from the city of Genoa, and she settled in the U.S. and married my great great grandfather, also from Genoa, in the late 1890s. So they were super early arrivals to the U.S. And it makes sense because that northern wave tended to be, especially from Liguria, way earlier than the southern wave. For example, my great great grandfather was naturalized as a U.S. citizen in 1884. So he was way back, and I provided, I think, the documentation, which is I still have in my family. It's very cool. But anyways, his wife on their marriage certificate, she has no parents listed. So I was like, that's interesting, and looked a little bit further into it, did some research with this company, and realized that she was most likely an orphan. She came to, which a lot of people have this history of foundling in the family. And so it was very interesting to find that out, and that I don't really know anything about her family or her parents or anything like that. So those are some interesting stories from my dad's side.
Well, then that's I mean, that's really pretty early. So do
Yeah.
you I mean, what do you know what kind of business he was in? Do you your great-great-grandfather, that he came so early?
I'm not sure, but my great grandfather, when he came to the U.S., within I want to say like 5 to 7 years of being here, he did a very very old school Chicago Italian thing. He opened a tavern on the west side of Chicago, which ended up being passed down to my grandfather and then was sold in the late '60s. But um, that I'm not sure what my great great grandfather did, but my great grandfather ran a tavern, which turned into a tavern, a restaurant, a dance hall. Um, and then my grandfather took that over from him for some time and then sold it. And then my dad and my grandfather and grandmother and the whole family, they moved out to the suburbs. But that was kind of the history there. So I wish I knew more, but it's I haven't been able to find much more.
Well, and he was probably I don't think they had passed a law yet, but they were already starting to slow down the immigration from Southern Italy or Italy in general at that time. So he probably was fortunate that he had that American was able to do that American citizenship thing, or they may not have uh, let him come back in.
Yeah.
That's really pretty interesting story. I've never heard that kind of story before, you know?
Yeah, and it's something I never knew, and it was so interesting. But yeah, you're right. They started in the early 20s putting those laws into place for immigration, which is actually funny because he ended up marrying my great grandmother, who is also of Tuscan descent from a nearby town called Bagni di Lucca, literally one town over. But they didn't know each other in Italy or anything like that. They
Mhm.
met in the US. You know how it was. There was a Tuscan neighborhood, there was a Calabrese neighborhood, so you lived with like a lot of your, paisani. But anyways, she was actually born in Germany, which is a very interesting wrinkle. I'm not really sure why either. The family legend is that, her parents or her father was looking for work. And as we know throughout Italian history, depending on what region and what time, there's a lack of work in some of these smaller, hill or mountain towns. So maybe for her, because she arrived in the US in 1924, maybe that played a part because her nationality was German.
Was
So
German.
she may have
Yeah.
had an easier being from an Anglo-Saxon country that was more acceptable, and the door wasn't closed on that. Although they came from Italy, but her nationality was German. So yeah, some really interesting things when you look into the history.
Oh yeah, no, there's all these twists and turns and things like that. Um and to your point, the ones that came early in the north, I mean, typically the northerners had more of they weren't just farmers, they usually had some sort of trade, whether they were stone cutters or, you know, miners or things like that, rather than the southerners who came later that were basically farmers, and laborers and things like that.
Yep.
Um, and then so now your mother's side of the family is from the South.
Yeah, yeah. So my mom's side has Sicilian and ancestry and ancestry as well from the region of Campania. So her ancestors come from a town called Campania in Campania in the province of Salerno. And then that's her Campania part. And then her Sicilian part is from a small town called Santa Caterina Villahermosa in the province of Caltanissetta, literally in the middle of Sicily. There's a really wild story from that side. I would say probably the craziest story in my family. And I don't want to say I was granted permission from my mom to tell it, but it's a very close to heart story. My mom grew up with her two grandparents, thinking one was Sicilian and one was basically what I call Neapolitan because it's very, very similar culturally. And her Sicilian grandfather, she found out in her, I want to say late 30s or early 40s, that he actually wasn't her biological grandfather. So she was like, I mean, she was super close with him. So at the end of the day, she didn't really care that much. It was like, okay, this is my grandfather regardless. But she always felt like, Sicilian because she had this grandfather who was very, very Sicilian and very like, he just had a persona that she loved and respected and kind of was like, well, whatever. He's not related, but he's still my grandfather, right? So, anyways, I want to say maybe like 7 years ago, we do the little ancestry thing, mostly for just like building a family tree on her side. And I just get into the thing because I'm younger, so I'm doing all this research and all this stuff for her. And I'm also curious because I knew my great grandfather, my non-biological great grandfather. And so I was very curious. I'm like, well, who is my great grandfather? So I want to say it was like 7-ish years ago. Through some like census records, documentation from Ancestry, I actually found out who my real great grandfather was, who also happened to be Sicilian. So not that much change there in terms of ancestry, but obviously there's a whole story behind that as well. He was the brother of my great grandmother's husband. So two brothers actually married two sisters, and we just don't really know what happened to my great grandfather. He had my grandfather with my great grandmother, and then he kind of just disappeared. No one really knows. Things were hush hush back then, so there was obviously some sort of divorce and remarriage and et cetera, et cetera. And they had two kids, and then a third came with the remarriage. So yeah, very interesting there. But I think one of the coolest wrinkles as well that ties me to a place other than Chicago, where I'm from, because all my ancestors basically went straight to Chicago. He was actually born in Franklin, Louisiana, which is a fun little wrinkle to the story because a lot of people don't know how significant Sicilian immigration was to Louisiana. I didn't really know that until the last few years. I actually had the opportunity to go there for the St. Joseph's Parade this year and really see the significant amount of Sicilian ancestry and celebration that there is in southern Louisiana. But my family was actually one of those people, all these years ago. And then as a child, my great grandfather, through this documentation, I found out that he moved up to Chicago with his family. And then, they ended up settling in the Chicago area. And then he obviously met my great grandmother. They got married, had a couple kids. And then we don't really know the story after that. But it's very, very interesting. Connects me to another area outside of Ellis Island, which is pretty much where all my ancestry went through. So it's a very cool story. Kind of strange, but a lot of people have those weird stories in their family of the random ancestor that they didn't know about. Fortunately, it didn't come through like a DNA test or something. My mom learned it, whatever, 20, 25 years ago, at least, maybe a little bit longer than that, around family. So, but no one really ever said anything. It was like hush, hush. So, very interesting story from that side as well.
Yeah, and I interviewed the guy. I don't know if you heard the interview with he's Italian, but he's an expert on Italian immigration here, and he was telling me about the Italians in town. I mean, they were Italians in Arkansas of all places, but he said they after the Civil War they needed people in the fields and stuff like that, and they tried it with the Germans and the Irish. They couldn't handle the heat, so they got Sicilians and Southern Italians to cut the sugar cane and things like that. That's a really interesting. And one of the things that he said, which blew me away, is that the person who created or founded, whatever you want to call it, Long Island Railroad in New York, he sent a number of Italians to this place in Arkansas, and he was going to give them the land, but he wound up passing away before this. They were supposed to work there so many years, and he wound up passing away before this whole thing could take place, and they basically didn't have anything. But so I'm assuming you did a DNA test, yeah?
I actually didn't. No,
You
I mean,
haven't?
no,
Really?
I probably will at some point. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think we're still some years away from them being pretty accurate. I think, like, for example, I know a lot of people that have done them, and like Ancestry will constantly be changing based
They
on,
all change them. Yeah, they
yeah.
all change the
So, and I
algorithm.
get it, but at the end of the day, it's also pretty hard when you look at it in terms of doing a DNA test based on nationality, because nationalities didn't really exist until recent history. It was more kind of groups of people in certain areas, and the paternal DNA and the maternal DNA versus like Italian wasn't really a thing, until Italy became unified 165 years ago. So yeah.
Well, they are, a lot of them now are starting to get away from that. They're kind of doing more like um, areas as opposed to that, and they're refining it. But the interesting one that I did, I there's what's the name of it now? My True Ancestry. No, I'm sorry. I did that one. I'll tell you about that one in a second. I sent my ancestry to Living DNA first because
Okay.
I figured they were based in Europe and I would get more Italians. But Italians don't do DNA testing because they don't have to, because they could just walk down the block to the cemetery and see 500 years of family. But what's interesting about them is that they do the maternal and paternal lines. And they go back to 10,000 years and kind of give you the migration paths and stuff like that. The other one, My True Ancestry, what's interesting about them, they don't necessarily track your DNA looking for cousins or anything like that. They match your DNA to archaeological digs from around the world. So they could pinpoint you, not to say that you're related to anybody there, but they could put your DNA in a certain place at a certain period of time. So they could say, well, you have DNA from a place in Rome in, AD or something like that. So that's a pretty neat one to do also. The problem with these things like Ancestry, which pisses me off with them, is they've gotten so expensive.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, I keep mine going. I pay the $5 or something just to keep my tree there, which um but they've become more of a big business, I think, now than anything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember my dad did one of those tests like a number of years ago, probably when we were, like I said, on Ancestry, like whatever, 6, 7 years ago. But yeah, my confusion with that was like every time you go back, it was just like the percentages just significantly changed, and it's like, okay, I don't. I don't want to say like there's obviously truth in it, no question, but I like what you're saying, the more kind of historical, like from deep history, for more of the understanding of what area they come from versus, oh, you're like this nationality. But I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of improvements that have been made and a lot more companies doing it, which, as we know, usually can tend to make the quality better when there's a couple more players in the game that are adding different aspects.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the living DNA one was my maternal line is almost like 95% or greater from the Caucasus, which just blew me away. That I found amazing. And my father's line uh, started out like in the, I guess in Iran, Persia area or something like that. And then they were all in mountains. So that line to wherever they show up now is all in these mountainous areas in Spain, the Alps, and places like that. So, that to me is a little bit more interesting because, like you said, you kind of see that historical path more than just, well, you Southern Italian. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're doing that a lot more too. I'm actually kind of a little bit of a nerd about this stuff. So like I've watched a lot like about the DNA stuff. But yeah, like a lot of people in the Italian peninsula, like the ancient ancestors came from Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, and then also the steppe, which is like central West Asia, kind of Caucasus, just about area as well. So that kind of Middle East, Western Asia was a lot of the original ancestors of people in the Italian peninsula. So it's not surprising to hear that, but it is really cool to learn it because people don't really think about it. Because people are thinking more about like the last 100 years versus the last 10,000 or more. You know?
I've seen people get violent. I'm 100% Italian. I don't care what it says. Like,
Yeah,
heritage is different from DNA.
for
It's like,
sure.
yes, your family's from there. They bring it from, but you know, don't freak out if you find
Yeah.
out that you got some Middle Eastern or Turkish or something like that in there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, plus Italy is in the middle of the Mediterranean, so you had people coming in and out from Northern Europe, Western Europe, the Middle East, North Africa. So you had a lot of all of that going on, in ancient history.
Well, there were still places there that the dialect is still Greek or Albanian.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that it's almost like Greek what they speak in some of these places. So now, have you been able to go back yet?
To Italy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been quite a bit, to be honest. I actually was just in Italy 3 months ago. I did a pretty big solo trip actually for 3 weeks, mostly in the north, a little bit in central Italy. Went to some places I had been to and also, hit some new cities. But yeah, I've been fortunate to go multiple times in my life, especially in the last like 5 years. I've significantly traveled over there. I went as a kid as well with my family a handful of times, which is great. I studied there in Milan
Great.
during
Yeah.
college. I was the unfortunate recipient of going the semester of COVID, so I only got half an experience versus the whole semester, but better than nothing. And I really enjoyed my time there. But yeah, I've made my way around a lot of Italy, but I always feel like there's like 100 more things to see.
If I knew what I know now, 30, I don't know if we'd be living there, but we certainly would have had a place there. I could kick myself for not, doing it. I mean, our first trip was 30 years ago, and I didn't know anything. My father said that he had family in Torre del Greco, and that was it. And we saw the sign, and we were going to Pompeii. We saw the sign. We didn't wind up going. And then they kind of just, had the kids and the work, and things got, drifted away. A trip we were supposed to go March of COVID or April of COVID, and COVID hit in March, so it
Yep,
got
and that was
postponed.
that.
But the bright side of the whole thing was I got contacted by my dad's half first cousin, who's actually younger than I am. And when we got there and connected with him, he took us to Torre del Greco and brought us into this apartment. Didn't tell us where we were going. And my father's two first cousins, both in their 90s, were there. And they had pictures that my grandmother had sent. And they had stayed in touch with my aunt up until the 70s.
Wow.
Nobody told me anything. That's what makes me nuts.
Typical. That's typical.
And especially, with my grandmother, who came from these noble families, I knew something of it because we had my grandfather's, what I refer to as his calling card. And my mother would say that my great grandfather was a duke or a count or something like that. But nobody ever really got into real depth about it until I started finding out. And I started finding out after my father had passed away, after my godmother, my father's sister, had passed away. So I had nobody to bounce this stuff off of until I started connecting with some cousins over there because my grandmother, only her and her aunt had come to America. The rest of the family didn't come, and they really didn't have any reason to come because they weren't poor.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I could only speculate as to why my grandparents came. And I think it's one of two reasons, or maybe a combination of the both. World War One had just broken out, and they had a young family. But her aunt had been here since 1905. And I can only guess that maybe what my cousin here tells me is that it was her great great grandmother, great great grandfather. that he was like an entrepreneur. He had a leather business of sorts. Either he made wallets or shoes or something. So maybe he said, "Well, come over and I'll help you start a business," because my grandfather did have his own business. They made him and his brother made bridal crowns and bridal veils and things like that
That's cool.
in New York City. Yeah, yeah. Well, what's funny is my cousin here, families were so close. I never knew it. I never knew Linda. I had no idea who she was. We got connected and finally met her in person. Her grandmother had saved beads from my grandfather's business. They're like 100 years old now, I guess. And so she brought us, me and my sister and my cousin, some of the beads to have. So
It's a
it's a
wonderful
nice
gift.
little piece of history, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool when you look into this stuff, all the different things you can discover. And sometimes, like, even in my case, where it was just like through, initial talks with one of these companies about possible, dual citizenship. And through that, like, I found out that the path would be really hard to do that. However, I found a lot of great documentation that connected the dots, or I wouldn't even say connected the dots. I mean, I didn't even have some of these dots to connect. I didn't even know some of these things at all. Like, finding out an ancestor did this or did that or was an orphan or whatever. Like, it's just very interesting to know.
Yeah. I mean, I have basically all the papers. I'm just waiting for my daughter to do something because I'm trying to do it all together. I'm still eligible through my mother because her parents never naturalized. My father, because of the new law that they put in place, I'm not eligible through there anymore. But they're making it harder and harder, and they're making it more and more expensive for,
Yeah.
people want to start. And the wait was a long time in the consulate, but now so many people have caught on to that they're trying to go through the courts
Right.
that's like all backed up.
Yeah.
So I want to do it mostly for the kids because they're both around 30, so that if they ever want to move there or live there or they have kids and they want to go to school there or something like that, because school is, as you probably know, is peanuts compared to here.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you are a citizen of Italy, it makes a huge difference in terms of cost.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I have a friend who moved there like 5 years ago. She got her citizenship and she loves it. She's been there for 5 years. Uh, we this last trip we were probably overlapped with you. We were there in May, the
Okay.
middle of May, and we were in Florence, Bologna, Milan, and my
Oh, yeah.
daughters and her fiance, they were like, "We're moving here," which I think everybody has that. You go there like, I love it. But why did they leave? Right? It's so beautiful here. Uh, so I said, well, let's see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Milan's a really nice cosmopolitan city. It's like Chicago, New York, or something like that. Very expensive, though. Very
Yeah.
expensive.
But yeah, compared to the other cities, I mean, I was there, I studied there, visited there a couple times. I'm literally representing the city today.
I see.
Yeah, I really do love this city. I think it's also has some sentimental value because of the fact that I studied there, and also it was a really weird point in time where I kind of had to leave there. I had the opportunity to stay with a host family when I was in Italy. It was just an older couple. They were absolutely amazing, fantastic people. I've went back and visited them twice since 2020, one of them being the most recent trip. So I created like a really good relationship in Milan. And I know the city really well. I know the public transportation really well. And I totally agree with you. It's very cosmopolitan. It's much more European than, I mean, it still has Italian aspects, obviously, but it's the most European city in Italy. It could fit more so in other places in Europe versus almost any other city in Italy. It's like, this is an Italian city and that's it. But yeah, it's cool. There's a lot to do. But yeah, it's a little bit more expensive naturally just with the international draw. It's also, I think it was a little bit, I don't want to say undiscovered because everybody always knew about Milan, but it's significantly more touristy
Yes.
in the last couple years than I remember. But yeah,
I went there the first time 30 years ago for work, and there was literally nobody in the piazza outside the Duomo.
yeah.
It was empty.
Now it's
And now
full.
you go, it doesn't matter what day of the week, it's packed. It's packed.
Yeah.
But that's one of the most fascinating churches that I've been to. St. Peter's is St. Peter's naturally, uh, but the history in Milan is really something. And I didn't know that I guess the stone is only used on the Duomo and one other building in the whole world, and it all comes from one quarry, and they don't use it for anything else, which was pretty neat. And the first when I went 30 years ago, it was black. They hadn't started cleaning it yet, and
Yeah.
now it's that brilliant white, and it's just nice to sit outside, and have a very expensive spritz and sit outside the door.
But yeah, yeah, that's it's the tourist area. It's expensive, but yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful cathedral. I mean, it's the largest church in Italy because the St. Peter's is technically in the Vatican, which is
That's
another
right. Yeah.
country, but weird technicalities. But point being, it's enormous. It's beautiful. When I went to Milan a few months ago, I actually went to a mass there, which was cool. It was
Nice.
something, yeah, it was just a really awesome experience. They have like a little area kind of roped off from all the tourists that they have the masses in because the rest of the church is so big that you don't even know there's a mass going on because you're in like the other area looking at all the beautiful stuff and there's a whole service going on with 200 people and you have no idea. So it's crazy how big some of those places are. It really opens your eyes to like, wow, you're in the center of Catholicism being in Italy. And just even outside of Rome, there's just so many places in Italy that are just amazing in terms of churches.
The churches. I mean, even some of the small towns, the tiny little churches, there's kept so well, and there's fresh flowers there. I mean, it's really unbelievable how they still take care of the places there.
No, it's wonderful. And I think that there's also, like you said, like the Duomo in Milan that 30 years ago, it didn't even look the same. I think there's been a lot of restoration too, because it's been like, hey, we need to keep this stuff looking nice. This is like the center of our town or our city. And this is what everybody sees and what we see. This is where everybody hangs out, in the piazza in the center of the city. You want your most prominent buildings looking beautiful and being renovated up to date, whatever. So that's why a lot of them always have construction going on too, because they're so ornate. I mean, think of the Duomo, the Gothic style with all the teeny little points and shapes and everything. You can only imagine that the wear and tear from just the city air after the time, so they constantly have to
Well,
renew
we went on a tour where we went, when we went up there and everything like
it.
that, and they have replaced or put copies. A lot of those now are copies, and they have
Yep.
the rare ones in the museum for good reason, I guess. We stayed, I guess, about a mile walk. We were over by the original Italy. That's where we were staying,
But yeah, yeah, yeah.
which was a nice area because it was quiet over there, and so we would, we would just walk over there. I don't think we didn't. No, we didn't take the metro in Milan. We took it in Rome, but it was a short walk. The weather was nice, so it was pretty cool. And then, like I said, we were in Bologna and Florence also. It's just so much fun being back. You hate to come back, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Believe me. Especially when you just, I feel like if you discover a new place as well, because you obviously have those places that you're like, like the Milans of the world for me that always have that sentimental value that I'll always enjoy going back to. But you discover like some of these new cities that you're like, you get back and you're like, hold on a second. Like, I really liked that place.
Yeah.
You enjoyed it while you were there, but then when you're back, you're like, oh, I really want to go back. And so I feel like that happens to me every time I discover a handful of cities. There's always like one or two that stand out, particularly that I'm like, oh, wow, I would love to do more there. Or wow, I would love to like even do the same things again because I had so much fun.
Yeah, well, that's what we liked. We liked Ferrara a lot because there were no tourists there,
Yeah, I've never
and
been there. Never been.
yeah, it's there's the big castle there, the
Yep.
Este Castle, but it was just quaint and quiet, and it was like a half-hour train ride, I think, from Florence, or Bologna. I don't remember which one. Yeah, so it was yeah, it was from Bologna. It was a nice, easy train ride, short walk from the train station to get to where the action is, and things like that. We went to Modena, which was
Nice.
another nice little city. They have a big market there, and like it's not like one of the ones just Saturdays. It's there every single day,
Yeah,
and
home
that
of the
was
balsamic.
yes. I brought back 2 bottles of balsamic.
I can imagine. That's what you got to do. You got to always make sure that you get the local specialty and throw it in the suitcase because you're not going to find anything like that at home.
And we were in Florence, and we weren't sure if we were going to eat because we ate a big lunch and stuff like that. But then the kids wanted to go out, so I said, "Well, if it's, as long as we're not going too far." And we found this little restaurant like around the corner from our apartment, and he had Tuscan beef stew. And I said, "I'll try that." And boy, it was just so good. And it was all Italians in the place,
Yeah.
So you're in good shape when there's just Italians in the place. And it was just so good, and wasn't expensive, and I don't think anybody even knew about it.
Yeah, no, that's the small local places with the yeah, without tourists, they can be hard to find in the Milans, Florence, Rome's, whatever. But again, if you walk and you go down the little street, it takes exploring, it takes walking, and a lot of people don't want to do that. You stay in the tourist area, you just walk to somewhere close by. It's not always going to be the same experience. But yeah, Italy is just full of amazing places. I guess back to the genealogy point too, I need to make a point of definitely getting to some of these small towns that my ancestors are from. I'm pretty far removed from Italy, as multiple generations away, so I don't have any significant family still there, so it hasn't like given me a major reason to be there like a lot of other people, to go back and visit their cousins or something like that.
Yeah, but just being in the hometown, it's a different feeling, even if you don't know anybody. And believe me, I, I've heard the weirdest stories where people are walking down the street and they say, "Who are you?" And you give your last name or something like that, and they point you to the place, or there may be a tavern in one of those towns
No, there's
that's still from the
definitely
family.
no, there's definitely reason for me to go back and do so. I guess I haven't been pushed as much as maybe some of the other people that have family, but I do want to do it definitely at some point. And I made my way around Italy in a lot of different places, so I think that's next on the list. Is at least start, for example, where my last name comes from. I would love to go there. And I mean, you look up these places too, and like I've been to Lucca, so I've been extremely close, but a little train ride away. But you look at these places, how beautiful they are too. 5,000 people, just would be amazing to go somewhere peaceful. Not easy to get to, but if you have some time, you can definitely swing it.
Yeah, and I have some friends in Lucca, people that I interviewed, and we were going to try and get there this time, but it was just so many other things to do, and we just couldn't get there. But I heard it's really, really nice there. Lucca's a really nice place.
Yeah, Lucca is gorgeous. I mean, in all honesty, Tuscany is one of my favorite regions in Italy, as it is for most people, whether being American, Italian, American, Italian. You'll hear that answer from a lot of people, and for good reason. Good food, good wine, beautiful landscapes. They have also a coast. If you go in that direction, a lot of wonderful little towns that kind of have their own history, because they were all very feudal for all these years. So they were like city states. So every area kind of developed its own culture to a degree, which is very common in Italy, but Tuscany is very particular. They still kind of have rivalries within these little towns and cities, which is so interesting. But, history guides a lot of behavior in the modern day. So it's not surprising that a lot of those things have lasted now, mostly through soccer and stuff like that. But still.
So before we go, what advice would you give to any young people that want to start researching their Italian
But yeah,
roots?
well, honestly, I would say I stumbled on a lot of stuff and it made me look into it further. I would definitely recommend, I think Family Search is one of the good search engines that I would use. It's free. You just have to create a login and you can really start to dive into a lot of things in your family. I would also, one of the biggest, especially with my last name, there's a lot of misspellings in documents, or documents that were digitized because the spelling may have been correct in the writing, but it got digitized and maybe two or three of the letters got changed. So I would, if you're doing research and you're really trying to find ancestors, it's almost guessing sometimes, but you have to come up with some different alternate spellings of your last name, particularly our last names from Italy that were just oftentimes trashed, either by our own ancestors because they wanted to anglicize, or by the government, or by the census or anything like that. That would be number two. And then number three, I would say maybe one thing I didn't take full advantage of either, when you have your ancestors around, whether it be grandparents or aunts or uncles, like sometimes they just don't even like think so much to tell you these things for whatever reason, because they're worried about giving you life advice or telling the same story maybe the 100th time, versus talking about maybe some ancestry or some stories from the old country, I would definitely, they are the main sources, much better than any website or anything you could find. So I would try and get as much as you can out of parents, aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents, great uncles, whatever, anybody in your family, and start there. And if they can't connect all the dots, then it's up to you to go through the documentation, take a little bit of time online. So, and have fun. I mean, this is your family after all, right? Like, this is the history of how everyone has a story, and why not learn yours, right? Why not learn as much as you can about your history and why you are where you are and how you are today? It's a lot of what came in the generations before. So that would be kind of my overarching advice for anybody in general, but especially young people that are trying to discover all of this.
Yeah, and to your point, it is a lot of detective work, and sometimes you step away for a few months and you come back, and all of a sudden something that you couldn't find pops up.
Yep.
It's funny how that works.
Oh yeah, it's not a, you believe me, you bang your head against the wall sometimes, and sometimes you won't find answers either. I mean, and it just is what it is. Like, you may have an ancestor, you can never figure out what their occupation was or something else if you're really like digging in deep to something. But at the end of the day, if you could find a lot of the important stuff, I think that's a win.
Well, yeah, and I tell people too that, if you know what town you're from, some people don't, but if you know what town you're from, sometimes there's a Facebook group with that town. And, you'd be surprised. You may not find family, but you learn about the town. You may make a connection there. And if you do go to visit, well, you have some idea, or you have somebody there who might, meet you or help you out, because it's happened. It's happened to a lot of people,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Well, Anthony, thanks a lot. I appreciate you being here. It's a lot of fun. Love the stories, and I love the pictures that you sent me. So we'll put them in there too.
Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it. And one last thing, I run a Facebook group and an Instagram account. They're both called Oriundi, and they're for Italians and Italian descendants. It's a lot of culture, heritage, celebration of our traditions, and things of that nature. So if you have any interest to join those, hopefully Bob can leave some of the links or something below. But Bob, thank you for having me. This is a really important thing for our community, and I'm glad that you've spearheaded this project to get a lot of people's stories out there, because everyone has an interesting story. You just got to get down deep. So thank you very much. This was really fun.
All right, you're welcome.